Welcome back to a new video. So recently I've been playing the brand new Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and as an avid fan of Zelda games and JRPGs in general, I knew I just had to play this game.
Huh? Oh boy. Already, right off the bat, he's just said something blatantly wrong. First of all, Zelda is not a JRPG at all, like not even in the slightest. It's more of an action-adventure game, really. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna be responding to another one of this guy's awful reviews. I already responded to his Resident Evil 4 review, and he was just as terrible as this, but oh boy. But yeah, welcome back, and let's just get right into this.
Unfortunately, so far, it's kind of been bland, boring, uninspiring, and sort of lacking in luster. So as you can see, I have the game loaded up on my Switch OLED, just in case you thought I didn't actually play it yet. I am actually playing it, so you can see.
Okay, you don't really need to show us your Switch to prove that you played the game. I mean, plus it just made a ton of dead air in your video for literally no reason. And if you really want to prove to us that you played the game, just show gameplay footage that you recorded. I mean, it's really not that hard. Then you won't have dead air like that, and it won't come across weird and awkward.
So I've been playing the game for pretty much all day now, and as of right now, I can't really recommend the game, and I feel kind of disappointed with my purchase. Now, when the first game, Zelda Breath of the Wild, came out almost 6 years ago back in 2017, I played that too and finished it, and at the time it was a really good game. At the time it was kind of amazing that you could play a game that looked that good and played that well on a handheld device, and I was really blown away with the gameplay and the graphics. But fast forward 6 years later in 2023 with the sequel Tears of the Kingdom, I'm not really impressed anymore with this level of graphics.
I mean, I guess that's fair, but I mean, it's a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, so it's gonna have the same art style, the same engine, and it's on the same console, so I'm not really sure what you were expecting graphics wise. Like, yeah, it could be better. Yeah, it would be great if they put this on a more powerful device with better graphics and all that, but we already knew for about 5 years, I think, that it was coming to the Switch and it was a sequel to Breath of the Wild, so I'm not really sure why you were expecting super high fidelity graphics, but I guess if you're tired of the art style and the graphics, then that's fair, but you gotta keep in mind it's the same engine, same art style, so not really much is gonna change, especially if it's on the same console.
The game looks exactly like the first game. It just looks like they copy and pasted it. The graphics have not improved at all, even though I'm playing on a Switch OLED, which is one of the latest versions of the Switch.
Well, yeah, but the Switch OLED still has the same specs as the base Switch. The only difference is it has a slightly bigger screen and an OLED screen. That's pretty much it. Like, did you really expect the Switch OLED to be more powerful than the base Switch? Because it was never advertised as that, and it has the exact same specs, just with a few minor tweaks to the screen.
It looks exactly the same as the first game almost 6 years ago. I just find it kind of sad and disappointing that the game has made absolutely no graphical improvements after all of these years. And I guess it's not entirely the game's fault, because Nintendo refuses to put out a Switch 2 or a Switch Pro which can handle better graphics. And this is kind of the limitations of the hardware.
I mean, yeah, it is limited by the hardware, and if they did make the graphics better, it would make the game run worse than it already does, so I'm not really sure what your problem is here. I mean, yeah, it sucks. The game could look better, it could run better, but in the context of it existing on the Switch, there's really not much they could do about it, other than make a new Switch, which we're probably not going to get anytime soon, because it's still selling super well.
But come on, it's 2023 now, and we have such amazing and powerful handheld devices such as the Steam Deck and the Iron Neo 2, which can play AAA modern games with 720p and 60 FPS graphics, and this is just kind of lacking in luster for 2023. The graphics of Tears of the Kingdom look like they've been drawn by a 5-year-old using a crayon.
Okay, now you're just being hyperbolic. Yeah, they could look better, but I think the art style really helps hold up the graphics though. It's still pretty beautiful to look at. It could look better I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, it could definitely look better. Textures could be higher resolution. Some of the textures are pretty muddy. But I think for the most part, it looks decent, and I enjoy the art style. So saying it looks like a 5-year-old drew it is kind of cruel, in my opinion.
The textures are just so low resolution, and the thing that I really dislike are the shadows. Even though they have dynamic lighting and the shadows move around as the sun sets and rises, the shadows just kind of flicker, and they have this weird kind of vibrating effect, which looks really strange and jarring when you're looking at it. The draw distance is also kind of disappointing, but the art style of the game is okay, I guess, if you're into that anime kind of style. I have to say it is quite nice to hear a bit more voice acting in the game, but unfortunately Link still does not speak. I know it's part of his character that he doesn't speak, but I just find this kind of lazy writing.
I mean, Link never spoke in any of the other Zelda games. He's more supposed to be a self-insert for the player, you know, so it makes it easier for the player to project themselves onto him. Like, and are you really gonna criticize the story of a Zelda game? Does anyone play Zelda for the story? Really, the only Zelda games that I thought had a decent story was Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and that's pretty much it. Maybe Skyward Sword.
It's just like, oh, we're going to make this character not speak so we don't have to spend money on a voice actor. It's just kind of hard to connect and relate to the character Link when he doesn't really seem to have much or any personality.
He's not really supposed to have any personality. I mean, what do you want? Do you want him to be voiced and have his own personality? Because people criticized Fallout 4 for having a voice protagonist to where it made it difficult for them to project themselves into their character. So maybe if they did add a personality and voice lines for Link, people would hate it like they did with Fallout 4.
So as for the gameplay, not only are the graphics and the art style of the game exactly the same as the first game, also the gameplay and the combat mechanics and the system for fighting is basically exactly the same as Breath of the Wild. It's like they just basically copied and pasted Breath of the Wild. I don't even know why they call this a sequel. It's more like DLC of the first game.
I mean, it is a sequel, and they have to use the same art style to convey that. I mean, it would look really bizarre if they completely changed the art style for a sequel, especially in the context of Zelda games, because each one is known for having their own art style for each era. And the combat, while for the most part is the same, the fusing really changes things up, and it makes the weapon breaking not as annoying because you can now craft your own weapons with fusing. And on top of that, they add new items and materials that can make combat more interesting, like the fire fruit that you can attach to arrows instead of having to buy fire arrows now. And now if you get damaged by gloom enemies, it will decrease your total health capacity, which can make things interesting. I mean, none of these changes are huge, but they definitely keep it interesting and make it a little fresh and not exactly the same as Breath of the Wild.
So because in the beginning of the game you lose your sword because you get attacked by some big evil boss guy, you don't really have a weapon, so you have to pick up random objects in the world like sticks and logs and anything you can find that's lying around. So you start off the game just whacking enemies with a stick, which is funny at first, but then gets very frustrating as your sticks keep breaking and you have to keep finding more sticks.
Okay, so this guy at the beginning of his video said he enjoyed Breath of the Wild, yet he's criticizing Tears of the Kingdom for doing the exact same thing Breath of the Wild did at the beginning, because on the Great Plateau all you grabbed were sticks. So I don't really get what the problem is here, and the point is you have to fuse the sticks with other pieces, and even then you progress and get further into the game to get better weapons, just like Breath of the Wild.
The combat system is very basic and simple. Basically, all you do is target the enemy and then spam the attack button. There's no light attacks, heavy attacks, combos. There's no dodging or rolling like you'll find in Elden Ring or Dark Souls games. So don't expect any kind of in-depth combat system if you're used to playing Souls games. You can't even roll or dodge out of enemy attacks. You can jump and you can use your shield to block, and you can do like a jumping attack.
I mean, that's not really true though. You lock on, you can block with your shield, parry with your shield, attack, sidestep, side jump, backflip, jump forward. There's many options for dodging. Maybe it's not the same as Elden Ring, but it's still there. And even then, you can hold the attack button to charge and use stamina to do a more powerful attack, so it's kind of like having a heavy and light attack. I'm starting to doubt if he even played Breath of the Wild, because he said he did, but I'm not really believing that if he's criticizing Tears of the Kingdom for having bland combat when it's the exact same one as the first game.
I just find the combat system to be way too simple. It's like an extremely simplified version of Elden Ring combat. As someone who played a lot of Elden Ring and who was used to being able to mix and match different weapons and use all these different abilities, I just find the combat in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom to be sort of lacking in luster.
I mean, yeah, Elden Ring does have better combat, but combat is never really the focus of Zelda either. I mean, it's always been there and it's fine, but most of it is just solving puzzles and exploring and doing side quests and all that.
The enemies are also kind of stupid. There's no tactics in terms of how they attack you. They just kind of randomly rush at you and then just stand around whilst they wait for you to attack them. And they don't really pose much of a threat.
What are you even talking about? They like have their own formations where bow guys will stay in the back and try to shoot you from afar while melee attackers will charge at you. And then if you knock their weapons out of their hands, they'll try to grab something and throw it at you. Or the moblins will even grab the smaller enemies and throw them at you. Like, I don't know, it's not really that dumb of AI. And he's not really providing any examples for any of his claims. He's not even showing his gameplay footage and demonstrating these things.
I also don't really like the type of enemies you'll find yourself fighting against most of the time. I enjoy fighting living creatures like humanoid enemies, and these enemies are almost entirely mechanical and robot style enemies.
Okay, that's just blatantly untrue. Really, the only robots you fight are in the sky areas with the Zonite robot thing. The rest of them are kind of the same enemies from Breath of the Wild, but they added a few extra monsters to fight. So I don't even know where you're getting this. A lot of them are just monsters. Barely any of them are robots. Plus, Breath of the Wild had robots too, but apparently it was fine when they did because you said you liked that game. But like I said, I'm starting to doubt he even played that one. You know, this is very similar to his Resident Evil 4 review I responded to. Is this a troll channel? Because maybe it is, or maybe he's just this stupid, because this is like almost identical to his Resident Evil 4 review.
I just find it a little bit boring fighting against these mindless, soulless robots. I know Nintendo chose this kind of enemy so that it's more child-friendly and there's not blood flying everywhere and it's like things dying in pain. It's just like a robot that doesn't feel anything. So I guess I can understand why they chose robots, but as an adult player who likes to be mentally challenged with his video games,
He likes to be mentally challenged. Oh boy. I mean, I say you already are a little mentally challenged based on the quality of your videos. So maybe just make more videos. That'll make you more mentally challenged. Also, how does gore and like fighting actual creatures instead of robots make the game more challenging? I don't really understand how those correlate.
I don't really find this game combat very stimulating or engaging. You also have this device which is called a Pudra pad, which basically looks just like a switch.
Actually, it's called a Pura pad. It's actually called a Pura pad, not a Pudra pad or whatever you just said. And it's basically the same thing as a Sheikah Slate, which was in Breath of the Wild, which is a game you probably didn't play, judging by this video, even though you said you liked it.
It's like he has a switch in the game, which is very strange because I always think of Zelda as a fantasy kind of game set a long time ago where they use bows and arrows and swords and they don't really have electricity, but now he has a switch which seems like it uses electricity and also has a camera built into it, so you can take photos with it and use it to set pinpoints and use it like a wayfinding device, which I really feel like it's kind of immersion breaking.
My guy, Breath of the Wild had these exact same things, just with different names and slightly different aesthetic. And I'd even argue that Breath of the Wild had more technology than Tears of the Kingdom, because there was the Guardians, there was the Sheikah Slate, all those towers that you activate the Sheikah Slate with. Like, I would argue that Tears of the Kingdom has more magic and fantasy elements than Breath of the Wild. And what do you even mean by immersion breaking? Do you just want a generic fantasy world instead of putting something interesting in the world like technology? And even then, this technology isn't super advanced, and I'm pretty sure it's powered by magic too. I mean, you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. I don't know a ton about Zelda lore, but I know I keep saying, well, Breath of the Wild had it and he liked it, but he also made a point of this is too much like Breath of the Wild and feels like a DLC. And my counter to that would be, I don't think this is a DLC. It definitely has more content than Breath of the Wild, and is more complex in terms of mechanics. Breath of the Wild was more of a foundation for Tears of the Kingdom. This game is just Breath of the Wild, but better. And that's really all I was asking for, personally. Like, I just wanted more Breath of the Wild. I didn't want them to reinvent the wheel. And in some cases, they did innovate with the Ultra Hand ability and the fusing. I mean, it's not as innovative as Breath of the Wild was, because Breath of the Wild came first, and did an open world Zelda first, but I think Tears of the Kingdom just takes what Breath of the Wild did and expands upon it. Calling Tears of the Kingdom a DLC to Breath of the Wild is like calling God of War Ragnarok a DLC to God of War 2018. It's just not a very good argument. And if you really want to go around calling sequels DLC, then look at Call of Duty. They release a game every year, but nobody ever calls the new games DLC. If new content, new mechanics doesn't make it a sequel, just makes it a DLC, then I don't even know what you consider a true sequel at that point.
I just found it so weird in the beginning of the game when Princess Zelda whips it out and starts taking photos with it like she's using a smartphone. So as in the same way as the first game, this game also features open world gameplay, which I'm kind of sick and tired at this point at Japanese game companies doing a really bad job at open world gameplay. Same thing happened with Pokemon Arceus or Arceus. They made this big open world which was very bland and boring and empty. It just had some random enemies scattered here and there. Same thing with Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. The open world is very bland and bleak and desolate and just feels kind of boring.
Okay, I don't know why you had to specify Japanese developers shoehorning in open world, but I'll tell you now, it's not just Japanese developers. A lot of Western developers do that too. And secondly, how can you say this world is desolate and bland? Like, there's so much to do. There's the sky area, there's Hyrule, there's underground, just so much content. If you genuinely get bored, that's kind of your own fault, because you're not actually looking for things to do or engaging with any of the stuff scattered around the map.
So I'm trying to find my way to open this door, and it doesn't really tell me what to do or where to go. It just points me in a general direction saying, oh, if you want to open this door, maybe you should go to this glowing shrine thing over there that's floating up in the air. And it just kind of leaves you to figure out how to get there. And I don't really know what to do at this point because I'm just running around, hopping from island to island, trying to find out how to reach this glowing green thing. And every island I'm hopping around just has nothing on it. It just has like a few enemies, some trees you can chop down, some food you can gather, some wild animals you can hunt for meat. But apart from that, it just feels so empty and dull.
You're upset that they don't tell you how to get from point A to point B? I thought that was the reason people loved Breath of the Wild so much, including myself. It just tells you where to go, and it's kind of like a puzzle to get over there. You have to figure out how to traverse the world and get there. And maybe you'll run into a few enemies, maybe you'll find some Koroks, maybe you'll find some new weapons. And it's kind of just enhanced with this new game, because now you'll find all sorts of materials to fuse together and all these structures to combine together to build things. But you're upset that they just don't directly tell you how to get there instead of figuring it out on your own, especially in a Zelda game of all things where the whole point is to solve puzzles.
Nearly 100% of the time you'll be doing exactly what you did in Breath of the Wild, which means chopping down trees, gathering wood, collecting food so you can cook it to make recipes and stuff that can help you later on in the game, and fighting random enemies using sticks and twigs and stuff like that. And then as you progress in the game, you'll unlock extra items and gadgets.
Wow, that is a really big oversimplification. You could sum up any game like that. Oh yeah, Resident Evil 4, all you do is just run around and shoot guys, nothing else. Oh, Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, you just chop down trees, cook food, and fight a few guys. No, let's not mention the Koroks, or the shrines, or the dungeons, the puzzles you solve, traversal, the underground, the sky islands. Yeah, let's just oversimplify it though.
So basically it's exactly the same kind of gameplay loop that you'll expect to find in the first game, and I'm really struggling to see what is new in this game apart from the fact that you're now up in the sky on these floating islands.
Really, the Sky Islands are the only difference you see between Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. None of the other mechanics I mentioned you noticed. Like, you don't notice the underground area, didn't notice fusing, Ultra Hand. I keep repeating myself because, like, holy crap, this video is just terrible. What kind of review is this? I mean, I knew what I was getting into when I watched another one of this guy's reviews, but holy crap, this is even worse than his Resident Evil 4 review.
As for the story of the game, I don't really feel like I'm engaged or hooked into finding out what happens in the story. It just seems like very typical Zelda game kind of story. You accidentally reawaken some evil guy at the bottom of some dungeon, and then Princess Zelda gets lost or kidnapped or taken away, and now you have to try and rescue her. How come in every single Zelda game You have to go and rescue Princess Zelda because she's completely useless at anything. And then you have to start at the beginning. Like, Link's either lost his memory or lost all of his abilities because he got weakened. And now you have to rebuild his strength and unlock all of stuff.
I do agree that Zelda games do need better stories. Even the ones I like I did like the stories in Ocarina and Skyward Sword and Wind Waker, but even then, it was just kind of the same plot. But also, Nintendo doesn't really create story-based games, and I never really pay too much attention to the story in Zelda. I just do the dungeons and side content. I've always felt that Zelda was more about the lore when it comes to its stories than the actual plot. The lore in Zelda is kind of interesting, but you don't go there for the plot. You go there for gameplay, maybe some lore.
That he just lost. It's just really bland and predictable Japanese story writing. We all know what's going to happen. He's going to defeat the evil power, rescue Princess Zelda, and everything's going to be fine again, and they'll save the Kingdom of Hyrule from this ancient evil. It's just so predictable. I just don't really feel like I can even recommend the game at this point, especially for the price point. The game costs £60, which is like 75 US dollars, which is insanely expensive for basically what is essentially a copy and paste of Breath of the Wild, which is now a 6-year-old game. I'm not really impressed that I had to pay so much money for basically just a copy and paste version of a very old game. So as of right now, unfortunately, I can't really recommend the game. I would wait until it comes down a bit in price, and I would have to give it a 6.2 out of 10.
Okay, now I'm convinced it's a troll channel or something, because once again he's doing the unnecessary decimal in his score, and also gave it a 6.2, which is the exact same score he gave the Resident Evil 4 remake, so I'm starting to think he just makes these videos bad on purpose, but I don't know, I still don't know for sure, but yeah, that's about it for this video. I just kind of wanted to talk about Tears of the Kingdom, and came across this terrible review and just kind of wanted to talk about it, but yeah, really enjoying the game so far. So far, I think it's on track to beat Breath of the Wild, my favorite game ever, so yeah, that's about it.